Jalen Lott's commitment to Oregon is further evidence that the golden age of Duck wide receivers is upon us. Commitments are looming for top defensive prospects. What is my confidence level that Dan can seal the deal? Plus, more fall camp position previews. Today, we're talking corners and those running backs. Today, we're running down a dream on this edition of That Show Out West.
This place has everything. In fact, the grass is damn green in Eugene.
That performance deserves a holy wallawa.
It's a feeling you cannot explain.
This place is louder than any other venue in the Big Ten.
This program is staged to compete and to win championships.
Welcome to the Big Ten, Oregon.
Welcome to That Show Out West for That Team Out West. I'm Ted LaRue. Now, this was originally supposed to be a Thursday show, as now I am starting to get into that rhythm where we are doing 2 shows a week, because there will be 2 editions of TSOW a week once we get into the season. So I wanted to do it on Thursday, but I figured, let's push it back to Friday so we can celebrate the big 5-0 together. No, it's not anybody's 50th birthday around here, but we have 50 days to go until Oregon kicks off the 2025 season inside Autzen Stadium against the Bobcats of Montana State. Man, that number, it just keeps on getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and it keeps on getting tougher and tougher and tougher to fight off that saying that I've been talking about this summer, the whole don't wish away summer. Man, I'm really trying to enjoy it as long as I can, but I can see football certainly on the horizon. Now, 50 isn't the only number that we're counting down to as well. I am going to continue to say, hey, don't wish away your summer. Enjoy the last month or so, and I am certainly in that same boat, even though it is becoming increasingly difficult to be able to keep on saying that, because in 22 days, I will be crossing the Columbia River into the state of Oregon. And on next week's show, I'm going to have a big announcement of when we are going to have a meetup, when I'm going to be in Eugene, and when that all is going down, so you guys can meet up, we can meet up, and we can talk Duck football for an hour or two. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Really looking forward to that, so people can maybe circle that on their calendars, and we can all get in person and talk about the green and yellow. I think you guys might have an idea of which geographic location on the map of the state of Oregon that I am going to start this show with here today, based on news that we've heard since the last edition of TSOW. You guessed it. We are headed to the northeast corner of the state of Oregon. We are headed to the peaks of the Holy Wallawas. 4-star top 60 overall athlete from the Lone Star State, Jalen Lott, committed to Oregon earlier this week. Now, I broke down his film. I broke down what I liked. I broke down what I love. And there is a lot to like and love, certainly, about Jalen. He gets the ball into his hands. He is just a flat-out playmaker with track type of speed. This is a big deal, no question about that. But if you kind of want to know more about more detailed thoughts on his skill set, go watch the show from earlier in the week. But to kind of put a period on this Lott recruitment, here's what I want to say specifically about the coaching staff. This is them flexing their muscles in the Lone Star State yet again. The pipeline to the state of Texas is alive and well, and it just appears to be growing and growing and growing. Of course, last year, it was DeCorian Moore, Rashad Samples. I think his dad is the head coach, I believe, over there at Duncanville, so there were some connections certainly to make that happen. That was a team effort to bring DeCorian, to get him to commit on the 4th of July last year, and then eventually for him to sign on the dotted line. Certainly, you got 2 big playmakers with Lott, and then you got Tredarian Ball there on the east side of the state over there in Texarkana. I think when USC was really starting to get that momentum in the spring, specifically out of guys from California, there were some, not me, there were some people out there that were saying, what is Oregon going to do if California is not as fruitful, if it's not as plentiful in an area where they've been successful when USC hasn't been as successful in the past. And I'm like, well, they'll go to Texas. They'll go to the East Coast, Maryland, DMV. That's been very fruitful for them. They've gotten a lot of really good players out of there these past handful of years since Lanning has been there. Manny Ahinacho? Anybody? Ife Obadegwu? Anybody? Like, there's been really good players that have come out of that area. To the Northeast, down to Florida, right? They're trying to get that Florida connection. Zaire Addison last year, Devin Jackson this season. So the thing about Oregon, they're a national recruiting program, and Texas certainly is one of those big pipelines. Now, when I heard of the commitment of Jalen Lott, and I already kind of had this idea in my head. I think I talked about it briefly on previous editions of TSOW, but specifically when the Lott commitment happened, I kind of sat back and I kind of thought to myself, and I'm like, that's another really, really good wide receiver that Oregon has gotten here over the last couple of years. And then I kind of laid it all out, and I'm like, we are entering a golden age of Oregon wide receiver play. Now, I'm going to get into multiple angles and certainly why I feel that way. But to get to that point, we have to look to the past, because to get to a golden age, it has to be the peak kind of your history at a specific position. And I believe that is what will most likely happen over these next couple of years, considering the amount of just insanely talented wide receivers that Oregon is bringing in. Like, I know Ohio State recruits on an uber elite level, but outside of that, Oregon is recruiting the wide receiver position, I believe, better than anybody in the country. There might be a handful of schools that might be in that conversation with the Ducks, but they are doing it on an extremely, extremely high level right now. But let's set this up talking about the past. Because when you think of Oregon and the success that they've had, what do you think of? When you think of Mike Bellotti, when you think of Chip Kelly, even, Mark Helfrich had maybe a little bit of success over there. Even Mario Cristobal and the success that happened there. The first thing offensively that's going to come to your mind is not wide receivers. It's not. It's running backs. It's running backs. I mean, you can go down the list. You can go to LaMichael James. You can go to Kenyon Barner. You can go to Royce Freeman. You can go all the way back, right? There's so many great running backs in this era that have really powered the success. DeAnthony Thomas, like, there's so many. I'm going to forget so many. I'm going to leave out so many, but you get the general idea. CJ Verdell, like 17 of the past 20 seasons, Oregon has had a 1,000-yard rushers. They are in the conversation of that RBU type of conversation. And trust me, I grew up in the state of Wisconsin where it just seemed year after year there was a new running back. There was a new running back. There's a new running back. And it seemed like that same trajectory has followed Oregon as well. Maybe that's why I gravitated to Duck football as well. But the point being, Jonathan Stewart, there's another one that I certainly left out as well. Okay, now that point's been made, let's move on to the next thing. Wide receiver isn't exactly a position that over this time of successful Duck football that has produced a lot of great players. Like, they haven't recruited at it. They didn't recruit at an ultra high level. And some of the best players that they produced, weren't exactly the highest level NFL draft picks. Let me give you an example of three fairly recent guys that I think are maybe towards the top of the food chain when we talk about Oregon wide receivers. Jeff Mayle, right? He had a 1,000-yard season during that 2010 national runner-up year. He was recruited as a corner. You look up his recruiting profile. Has the old CB there. So, we talk about recruiting, which we'll talk about here in just a minute, but this guy recruited on the defensive side of the football. Jeff Mayle went undrafted, played 4 years in the NFL, and had 9 total catches during his time as a pro. Sammy Parker is probably one that you really think of as maybe one of the top receivers in Oregon football history. He was a 4th-round draft pick. So we're talking about guys that are towards the top. And we're not even talking about the first 3 rounds right now. We will in just a moment, though. Sammy Parker played 6 years in the league, just over 1,500 yards. You got Josh Huff. When I played NCAA 14, tore it up with the old Huffster. But like when we're talking about recruiting, he was a high 3-star, low 4-star type of recruit. He ended up being a 3rd-round draft pick, 4 years in the NFL, just over 500 yards. So these guys aren't uber high NFL draft picks of the previous era. They weren't uber high from a recruiting rankings and a talent-wise coming out of high school perspective. That might have something to do with Chip not exactly loving recruiting, but certainly being a good developer when he comes on campus. And, of course, the structure of the offense. There's a lot of reasons, certainly, to this as well. But for those of you on YouTube, I got 2 tweets on the screen that I think really exemplify what exactly is happening in terms of talent acquisition at the wide receiver position that is forming this golden age of Oregon wide receiver play. One from Max Torres of Scoop Duck and one from myself. So we got to talk about, since Dan Lanning has taken over, Oregon has 3 5-star receivers. I think in previous eras of Oregon football, a 5-star wide receiver really wasn't on the radar. You had Jurion Dickey, who was the number 28 overall player in 2023. Gatlin Bair, who was a 24 guy. We know is a 2-year mission. He's going to be a 26 here eventually. He was the number 30 overall player. DeCorian Moore. I think when Chip Kelly's on campus, when Mark Helfrich is on campus, even going back to Mike Bellotti, I don't think they would have ever dreamed of a player like a DeCorian Moore, which these are, once again, we're getting multiple examples of why this is a true golden age of Oregon pass catchers. Number 5 overall and a 5-star plus, dare I say, generational type of prospect that DeCorian Moore certainly is. Oregon, to put it into perspective, in the years, and some of these guys are on the Oregon roster now, but in the years before Lanning got there, you look at the 21 class, Troy Franklin was the number 43 overall player within that class. Pretty good prospect. Pretty darn good prospect. Dante Thornton, who ended up at Tennessee, was number 71 overall. So, hey, 2 top 100, 2 top 75 overall receivers. That's pretty good. Yeah, but when you look at what Oregon has stacked up within the last 3 years, they're certainly taking it to another level. Kyler, Casper, Justice Lowe, they were 4 stars in the 22 class, but none of those guys were in the top 150. Micah Pittman was top 100 in 2020. You take some of these guys. You take a Cooper Perry, who was he was maybe in the 180. Cooper Perry was 182 in the 25 class overall. You look at a Dylan Gresham in 24 at 176. In previous eras of Oregon football, those would be maybe some classes, maybe not other classes, but in some, those might be one of your top wide receivers of a 2-year span or a 3-year span. But now we're talking about, I mentioned those 5 stars. Now we're talking about this year where Messiah Hampton and Jalen Lott are both guys that are sniffing the top 100. I mean, we're talking about a guy like a Jeremiah McClellan, who was a top 70 overall player that they flipped from Ohio State. And the list goes on and on and on as well. They are just taking it to another level. But why? Why is this happening? Okay, I talked about this history. They didn't really have a precedent of great wide receiver play. I think one thing that really goes underrated when we talk about Dan Lanning is just he hits frickin' home runs when it comes to hiring assistant coaches. I think Dan Lanning's journey has a lot to do with that. And it's been documented. He's talked about it during interviews of how far he had to drive to just for GA jobs, and the support certainly that his wife and his family had during his coaching career and the grind that he had. And I think he looks for those same guys that have that same motivation and that same drive that he has to succeed. Right away, he goes out and hired Junior Adams. Look who Junior Adams recruited at Washington. Pretty darn good. Pretty darn good. Right? And then he comes over here, and we talked about Troy Franklin before. Not a Lanning era recruit. But what happens? Okay, what's another example of why this is a golden age? You have the best overall season from an Oregon wide receiver. Most receiving yards in a season and most receiving touchdowns in a single season, and that was in Dan Lanning's second year. So he goes out and gets Junior Adams. It's clear that there is true development going on at the wide receiver position. Okay, you had, regardless of coordinator, you had Kenny in 22, you had Stein starting in 2023. Okay, and then you factor in Junior's great recruiting ability as well. We talked about Decorian Moore earlier, and I've just rattled off the names that they've been able to bring in here as of late. Okay, and then now we circle back when Junior Adams, I think it's a good sign that your program is entering into a successful period at wide receiver when the Dallas Cowboys come knocking and say, yeah, we want your wide receiver coach. And then he becomes their wide receiver coach. And now Dan goes out, hires a guy in Ross Douglas that did a really good job in 1 year getting his receivers, playing them up towards the higher level, towards the ceiling, certainly of their abilities, having the top passing offense in the country at Syracuse. And Ross Douglas is proving his recruiting chops with what he was able to do, finishing the job with Hampton and certainly getting commitments out of Jalen Lott as well. Those two guys in this class, I think, are very, very, very good players. And then you see my tweet on this for those of you on YouTube. 2027 might be like the peak, the platinum, the diamond of the golden era. When I kind of looked at this possibility, I'm like, this is insane. Let me explain to you what the 2027 season could look like from the wide receiver position. Could is the key word there. We know there's this thing called the transfer portal. But 2027 could see the following. The last/junior season for the following. It's going to be the last season for Decorian Moore, Cooper Perry, Dylan Gresham, Jeremiah McClellan. It would be the second year, Gatlin Bear, Messiah Hampton, and Jalen Lott. Oh, and then you throw in a second year of an absolute freak at tight end in Kendre Harrison as well. Dante Moore won't be on campus. Not sure who the quarterback would be in 2027, but they might be. I got a pretty good idea that they'd put up pretty good numbers considering that. I know a lot of people look towards 2026 as that possible championship season, but man, 2027 could be maybe the best passing offense that we've seen. Appreciate it, folks. We are truly entering a golden age of Oregon Duck passing attacks, and it's because of those weapons on the outside. Recent history has proven to us you need elite level playmakers on the outside to be in that championship conversation. Look at 2019 LSU. Decorian Moore has been compared to a guy that was on that team that put up big numbers. Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson was on that team, and he's one of the best receivers in the NFL in the world right now. Look at 2020. Devontae Smith won the Heisman at Alabama. Look what they did through the air. I know you had some of the Georgias and the Michigan and the line of scrimmage certainly as well, but look at what happened last year. Like Oregon in the Rose Bowl, it's a perfect example. They saw it firsthand. They could not stop Jeremiah Smith. You look at Emeka Ibuka. You look at some of these other weapons. It led Ohio State making those plays to a national championship. You need to be able to have those special playmakers that can take over a game on the outside. Having multiple of them, Ohio State has found out, okay, you got those types of guys on the outside, and many of those guys on the outside, you're going to be really tough to stop. Welcome to the Golden Age, folks. Sit back and enjoy. We go from the offensive side of the Oregon recruiting trail to the defensive side of the Oregon recruiting trail. You know why I remain positive throughout those spring months, those brutal spring months with losing out on some big recruitments and those flips and all that? Because I knew there was food left on the table. I knew there was still parts of the smorgasbord that Dan and the staff could certainly eat, and they are in the mix for 3 big-time prospects. And I'm going to communicate to you my recruiting confidence level right now. With these 3 guys, Oregon has made the Hayes Fawcett graphic. They've made the top 3. They've made the top 4. They've made the top 5. They've made the finalists when it comes to these guys that I'm about to talk about right now and communicate my level of confidence that Dan and company can seal the deal right now. You know, not included in this is Devon Benjamin, which I also feel really good about. That should also exemplify how much food is still left on the table, specifically here for Tosh Lupoi and the defensive coaching staff, certainly right now. Now, with these 3 guys, this is how I'm kind of rating my confidence level. I'm rating it like on a 5-star scale, like you see on the recruiting rankings on On3, 24/7, and Rivals. For example, if I have a 5-star confidence level, I'm like, this thing's locked up. It's a foregone conclusion. Oregon is the clear leader. They've probably been the clear leader for a long period of time. There's really no other school that I feel is a threat right now to Oregon. That's how I felt about Nacho the last month-ish before he committed, really after the official visits. I'm like, yeah, Nacho's coming here. It's just a foregone conclusion. It's the worst kept secret in college football recruiting. That's kind of the 5-star. Once you go down to the 4-star, you still view Oregon as the leader, but there's room. The door is maybe creaked open a little bit. It's mostly closed, but the door is open where if a team maybe drops a big old bag, that they could maybe be a late surge and maybe they could take a commitment away from the Ducks at that point. Once you get to that 3-star level, that's where things can go either way. Whereas, like, yeah, you could convince me that, maybe Oregon could pull this one out, even though they're not the leader right now. Or you could convince me, yeah, there's a school that is, even though Oregon's in the mix, which they are for all of these guys, there's a school that's a leader. Maybe there's a second school that's certainly a little bit above Oregon right now, but maybe Oregon could certainly make a late push for either of these guys. Once you get to those 2-star, that 1-star level, Oregon, it's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. There's not really much of a chance. There's multiple schools that are probably multiple levels above the Ducks. Okay, now that we've got that out of the way, let's start on a positive note, and let's talk about the guy that I feel the most confident with. Now, out of all 3 of these guys, he is the only one that has set a commitment date. Deuce Geralds is set to commit on August 2nd. He recently announced this. The 6'1", 268-pound defensive lineman out of Sewanee, Georgia. This is very important because of the recent decommitment of Ami Malawa. Now, Ami was kind of like that nose tackle, bigger defensive tackle type of guy. And now that they lost Ami, they lost Tom earlier in the cycle, flipping over to USC. I really would like to see them get like a defensive tackle or a nose tackle. I'm not sure if Deuce is that guy. He's a little bit quicker, maybe. He is like, he does play the interior defensive line, but he's a little bit quicker. Maybe he's a little bit smaller, but hey, Deuce Geralds is great. Like being a top 100 defensive lineman, I will certainly say that. I've got my recruiting confidence level at 4 stars. Now, I want to say this. He put on Instagram a couple of days ago, earlier in the week, hey, I got an announcement. If that announcement was, if he would have said, hey, I'm committing, and I'm going to be committing in 16 hours or however that countdown went on, I would have had a 5-star confidence level. There has been a lot of steam for Oregon in this recruitment as of late. Oregon and Michigan are kind of the leaders. But now, having this thing drag on for another like 3.5 more weeks, I think it gives a little bit of room. We talked about that door being creaked open a little bit. We know Michigan is in this race. We know what they can do when it comes to dropping a late bag into some of these recruitments. I think I still feel very strongly that Oregon is going to get a Deuce Geralds commitment. Having Deuce and Tony Cumberland, that's a good defensive line. I think they're going to be able to build on that as this cycle maybe goes along, but I still think that door's creaked open a little bit. It's mostly closed. I think Dan really values Deuce and really values this recruitment. I think the Ducks get it done, but I think some other schools are certainly still in the race right now. If it were an earlier commitment date, like say if this one were like this upcoming week or within the next 6 or 7 days, it would be at 5 stars. But because of the length of time, a lot can happen in 3 weeks. I've got this one sitting at 4 stars. Let's go to the next one, and this is a 5-star prospect coming off of that edge position. Anthony Tank Jones, the defensive lineman, 6'3", 245 pounds, out of Mobile, Alabama. Oregon is in his final 3. Alabama and Texas A&M are in there as well. Now, here's the thing with Tank. I think the recent move of Richard Wesley committing over to Texas, I think Oregon is they're looking around and be like, hey, we need an edge rusher. And it's certainly not 90%, 100% chance that Zion Ely is going to open up his recruitment at any time. I know that's been floated out there by me. That was my bold prediction. Maryland's got to lose some games I think, for that to happen. I think some changes got to happen in that coaching staff. So that's not 100% guaranteed. So I think Oregon is looking like we got to find ourselves the next generation of edge rusher. And I think Anthony Tank Jones is sitting there where Oregon, I think, feels like this is a position priority where they need to find a really good player, and they need to continue to stack up onto this defensive line. I mentioned losing Ami Malawa. I know he's inside, but you certainly need those numbers up front on the defensive line with Anthony Tank Jones. Now, one thing to keep in mind recently, 4-star edge KJ Ford was recently predicted by the folks at Rivals and On 3 to go to Alabama. Alabama insiders say this doesn't really have an effect right now on Anthony Tank Jones. My confidence here on the graphic, I have 3 stars. On my graphic, I did not have a choice for a half a star. If I had a half a star option, it would be a 2.5. Alabama, Kalen DeVore, they've been on a recruiting heater right now. This is a big time target in state for them. I view them as the leader. If for some reason, whether it's Ford or whatever reason, this thing goes to Oregon and Texas A&M, then I think maybe that gives the Ducks a little bit of a better shot. But as long as Alabama is in this race, my confidence isn't going to be ultra high. But I do think Dan and this staff says we need to go and we need to find ourselves a really good edge rusher. And right now, Anthony Tank Jones is that really good edge rusher that is certainly on the board. Let's finish things off. Deep breath, everybody. Let's go to Tyler Atkinson, number 8 overall player in the country, the 5-star linebacker, 6'2", 205 pounds, out of Lawrenceville, Georgia. He recently trimmed his list down to 4. In-state Georgia Bulldogs, Clemson Tigers, Texas Longhorns, and of course, the Oregon Ducks. Now, I put this out on Twitter yesterday, and I'm like, I've got a guarded optimism. I've got this weird kind of optimism. I say guarded because I'm not like going out on a limb and saying, yeah, Oregon's going to be a big time player for this, or I'm going out and certainly making any predictions, bold or not, right now. But I'm just like, Dan, going back to when he was on the staff at Georgia, he recruited this kid since 8th grade. We know how good Dan is at developing some of these relationships as well. We know how good Oregon is at the branding, and this Atkin Up thing, that the brand that he's got going on is a big priority. Apparently, they put a really good package together. Dan Lanning is taking the point in this recruitment. I know there was a lot talked about earlier in the cycle about, Oregon and the money. What if they're kind of holding on to the money like they kind of were with Nacho? What if they're kind of holding on to the money for some of these big recruitments that Dan really values? I think it's very clear that Dan really values Tyler Atkinson. Now, does that mean he's going to get the job done? That doesn't automatically mean that. I've got my recruiting confidence level at 3 stars. Like I mentioned, I just got this weird feeling that we know Hayes Fawcett put out a graphic that said 2 commitments coming up. We've seen one in Jalen Lott. Deuce Geralds is going to commit in August. Sounds like Devon Benjamin is going to commit in August. We don't know when Anthony Jones is committing. We do know that Tyler Atkinson is going to be committing soon. Is he the second one? There hasn't been. Georgia seems to be the leader right now. Texas may be making some push. But on the Oregon front, there's a lot of people, maybe some insiders, that aren't saying a ton about this recruitment right now. Is this a surprise in the cycle for Dan Lanning? It's possible. If I were making a prediction right now, I probably would say Georgia stays home. But if Oregon is saving their money, if Dan capitalizes on the relationship that he's been building for years and years and years, this could be a big deal. Is that second commitment from the Hayes Fawcett graphic, is it Nick Abrams, where he's scheduled to commit on July 16th? Yeah, maybe. I think Oregon is going to take one of those 2 linebackers right now in this class. I think you're going to see a linebacker commitment one way or the other probably pretty soon to join Tristan Phillips. I believe that this is a 2 guys from the linebacker position in this class is the amount that they are going to take in the 2026 cycle. But boy, if they could get Tyler Atkinson, man, this would have an earthquake type of effect. And I mentioned before, I'm like, don't maybe get your hopes about the number 1 class. getting a guy like Tyler Atkinson, maybe you could start to see that forming, and maybe they could really make that push up towards the top 3. I know USC and Georgia are really solidified right now. Do I think that they're going to get Atkinson? Do I think that they're going to get Jones? I would probably favor the in-state schools as of right now, but I just feel them kind of lying around and sneaking around, and we will certainly see what happens. But I feel the most confident, certainly, about Deuce Geralds. Round 1 of my fall camp position previews was a lot of fun. How about we get round 2 underway? And just like round 1, we are starting on the defensive side of the football. This time in the secondary with the corner and star positions. This is 3 of the 5 positions in the secondary in Oregon's base 4-2-5 defense, where we're looking at those 2 cornerbacks on the outside, and then we're looking at that star position. People have called it a nickel. Some people have called it a slot corner, even though it's not really a slot corner. It's kind of like a corner safety type of hybrid position here in Tosh Lupoi's defense. I think when you look at the secondary as a whole, and of course with 3 of the 5 positions here, this certainly does apply. Everybody gone. Everybody gone. There's a lot of new blood, and fall camp is going to be hella interesting in the whole secondary, and especially with the corner and the star position. So I want to talk about the losses, what is departing out of this room, and there is a good chunk. You look at Jabbar Muhammad, who transferred in for 1 year last year after his All Pac-12 season at Washington. He led Oregon in 2024 with 12 pass breakups. And you look at Nico Reed. I thought he played really well in some key games for the Ducks last season. He was an all Big Ten honorable mention, 13 starts, 2 interceptions, including the game-sealing, conference-sealing interception in Indianapolis against Penn State. Brandon Johnson started a majority of the games at the star position. He was an all Big Ten honorable mention player. Cam Alexander transferred in. I thought he might play a little bit more. He only played 22 snaps, so that's not a huge loss. Dante Manning was kind of like that big depth piece beyond Muhammad and beyond Reed at that corner spot. He's gone. Roderick Pleasant is a guy that a couple of years ago in the 2023 recruiting class, he was a 4-star, top 100 type of kid, really fast track guy in the spring. He was just buried on the depth chart. There's a lot of names, and we'll get to it when we talk about this season and the upcoming room. But he was just kind of buried and didn't kind of really maybe develop as much as he needed to be able to contend for some of these spots. Roderick Pleasant in the portal. He's off to Westwood to play at UCLA. Kamari Terrell transfers to Texas State. When we take a look at some of the additions, of course, there are 3 true freshmen coming in. We'll talk about those as this commentary progresses. But how about the transfers? These are 1-year guys that they're expected to be plug and play and have a significant contribution on this year's team. First, Jaden Kennedy is the transfer from Ole Miss. Now, Kennedy was playing safety for the Rebels last season, but I think they're really expecting him to be maybe in that star role, or I think one place that he's, really going to fit in well is in a dime package. When they bring in 6 defensive backs, I think he might be the first option to be that dime back of sorts. But he had 12 pass breakups, which was 3rd in the SEC last season. And how about Theron Johnson? This is a guy that I'm really excited about. Of course, covering the Big Ten, watching the Big Ten for these last couple of years. He's somebody that I certainly had my eye on last season. A transfer from Northwestern, all Big Ten second-team guy. How about 53 tackles, 11 PBUs, 4 TFLs, and 2 interceptions? He can do it all. He takes away half the field. He's great in man coverage, extremely high man coverage grades. A lot of times for the Wildcats, he's taken away that receiver on that side, which is what you love, what you love to see and what you want to see from a plug-and-play transfer type of defensive back, and that's exactly certainly what Oregon needed. So now what does the room look like? I got 12 guys sit in this room. I think there might be a couple of others kind of out there that I was really unsure of. It just says DB, whether they're playing corner or safety, but I'm rolling with 12 guys here in this preview. Ife Obadegwu, the redshirt freshman. Theron Johnson, a redshirt senior. Dalen Austin, a redshirt sophomore. Jaleel Florence coming off of an injury is a redshirt junior. Sione Lalea is a redshirt junior. Jaden Kennedy is a redshirt senior. Naeem Offer, there's the first of the freshmen. That's the highest rated one right there. True freshman. Dakota Fields is a redshirt freshman. Solomon Davis is a redshirt sophomore. Brandon Finney and Dorian Brew, true freshman. And then I got Zach Grisham in there as a redshirt junior. Whew. Take a deep breath and get ready because the entire depth chart, folks, is up for grabs. Now, when you talk about spring football, you're talking about there's no depth chart, right? Chris Hampton said that at his press conference during the spring. There's no depth chart. We're just trying to see the individual traits. We're trying to see the individual skills with different groups and different people and all of this. And you got to imagine coming out of the spring, they got an idea, I think, of who is going to be a contender for a starting spot, but I honestly believe there could be 6-ish in the running to start in these 3 spots. I honestly believe that. So fall camp is going to be, there's going to be hella battles going on to determine who are going to be the guys that are going to be out there for the first series of the game against Montana State on August 30th when this thing gets going. Now, and then beyond those starting roles, there's plenty, and that's another thing about fall camp and these battles, there's plenty of those second team type of roles that I think are going to be very, very intense. It could be true freshman, it could be redshirt senior. There's guys all across the board that I think are going to be in this battle. Now, coming out of spring, going into the fall, what do I feel are maybe, who do I feel are some of the contenders that could, that lead the clubhouse? Let's just put it that way. Been hearing a lot of good things about Ife Obadegu. 6'1", 195 pounds. He comes over from the East Coast in that Maryland area where Oregon has been recruiting really well as of late. Look, I love that I'm hearing good things. He had that great play in the spring game where he put his shoulder on the football, forced the fumble from Jay Harris. I think that was the one that Blake Purchase picked up and took it for a touchdown. But here's the thing, folks. For as much good things as I'm hearing about Ife Obadegu, this is a guy that's going to be playing his first full year of college football. Now, of course, he was, had the year of weight training and speed training and all that things that kind of get integrated and learn the defense, learn the scheme and all of that, and that will certainly help. But still, this is a young cat out there. And that's I think that's the whole secondary as well. There's a lot of excitement, I think, about a lot of young players, but they're young. And it might take them a little bit in the first half of the season to really get their feet under them and to be as good and reach the ceiling that they're going to reach, certainly in the 25 season. Outside of Ife, and I said this during my projected depth chart a few months ago, I think Theron Johnson and Jaleel Florence are going to certainly be in a battle for a starting spot. I talked about Theron and what he has, but Jaleel, you go back to that 2023 season with Jaleel Florence. He made 9 starts in 2023, and to be honest with you, he most likely would have started if he would have been healthy last year. There's a scenario in a world out there where maybe they don't bring in Jabbar Muhammad if they have a healthy Jaleel Florence last season. I feel that strongly about him. So if he's healthy, I think that's going to be huge. That's going to be huge. And I think there's a world we live in where maybe it's Theron Johnson on one side and then maybe it's Jaleel Florence on the other side, and you go with the experience at the starting spots. But I think regardless, he's going to have a say on who's the starting corners when this regular season certainly gets underway. I would keep an eye on, like I said, I'm going to 5, I'm going to 6 when you include the guys that are going to be fighting for the star position, but I keep an eye on Sione Lalea. Hey, his size is gonna give him an opportunity. Last year was his first year with the Ducks, coming off of a couple of years in the JUCO ranks, but 6'4", 190 pounds. Played a really good game against Illinois last year where he had that interception. He's got an 85.1 coverage grade according to Pro Football Focus. So I think that he is gonna be in this conversation as well. So when I'm looking at corners in terms of the conversation, okay, who's gonna be in the battle in fall camp to be CB1 and CB2? I think it's going to be Iffy. I think it's going to be Theron. I think it's going to be Jaleel Florence. And I think Sione Lalea is going to be in there as well. Now, I know there's other guys like Naeem Offord. People that say, hey, what can we see out of Dakota Fields, who's a redshirt freshman as well? I just think, maybe it could happen, but I just think the top of the depth chart with those names that I talked about, I think that's just too talented. But maybe some of these true freshmen can fight their way in and everything. But I think experience does certainly play a factor in all of this. And those are the 4 guys that I really deem that I think are going to be battling in fall camp for some of these starting corner spots. When I get to the star position, it seems that Dalen Austin is the leader in the clubhouse right now. He's a redshirt sophomore. Jaden Kennedy, I think, is another name that you need to watch out for. But right now I would favor Austin as the guy at the star position. I think the big question, we can talk about starters, we can talk about depth charts until we're green and yellow in the face, but the question I think that we all want to figure out starting with fall camp, is this group truly going to be better? I think like you look at the guys that I mentioned, Jabbar Muhammad transferring in from Washington, Brandon Johnson transferring in from Duke. Some of these guys that they've been able to get, Nico Reed was a former Colorado Buffalo. Some of these guys that they transferred in, I don't think they have as high of ceilings as some of the guys that they've recruited. But you kind of got a sure thing. You know what you're going to get day one out of transfers like that. I think like this year in so many different ways, it's all about the development for this coaching staff. So many of their recruited guys are going to get the opportunity to finally get on the field. We're going to find out about talent evaluation. We're going to find out about development. Okay, how much do these guys develop during the spring? How much will these guys develop during fall camp, which is what we're talking about right now? And then how does that translate to the season? I think once we get to the end of the season, we might kind of look at this and be like, yeah, this group is better maybe in November than maybe the group was last year. Not saying it will happen, but I'm saying like, yeah, we could certainly be in that situation. I feel good that Oregon could certainly get into that situation as well. But that's the big question. Are they going to be better? I think they need to be better. We know that the secondary last couple of years, that's been a big reason why they've maybe bowed out and haven't gotten that national championship type of opportunity. And like when you look at this depth chart, or when you look at the names in this room, I should say, right now, let me just list some stuff off for you. Jaleel Florence, Solomon Davis. Solomon Davis will likely be in that star depth chart position. And then Dalen Austin. Those are the only guys that have been around 2 or more years. You need to find a leader. I think it's fairly obvious that it sounds like Dylan Thieneman at safety is going to be the guy that transfers in. He's going to be the leader with those guys. He's going to be the leader of the secondary. But who's it going to be in this corner room? And I think this is a big time, right? It's hot outside. It's everybody's sweating. You know, and people talk about the NFL with training camp. Sometimes people don't want to be there, but who's going to step up and be that vocal leader? I think that goes for a lot of position groups with a lot of new faces and a lot of youth. But specifically, who's going to be the leader? Dan Lanning really encourages, hey, you don't have to be a senior. You don't have to be a junior. You can be a leader. You can be vocal when you're a freshman. You can be vocal when you're a sophomore. But you know, what I was saying with the experienced guys, is it going to be one of those guys? Is it going to be is it going to be somebody like a Theron Johnson that kind of comes in and establishes himself as a vocal leader? I think that's something that this group certainly needs to establish within fall camp as well. The last thing I'll talk about as it pertains to corners, these true freshmen. Okay, it was the DB recruiting haul that everybody's talking about. Are they going to find a role this season? I've got to imagine that Naeem Offord is going to find a role. He made some really good plays during the spring game. I think Dorian Brew and Brandon Finney are both really good players. Could they find themselves a role? It's possible. I feel better about Naeem Offord finding a role in the 2 deep right now. I feel better about that than maybe Brew or Finney. I think Brew and Finney, maybe give them a year in the system, maybe give them a couple of years, and they're going to be able to certainly find their way into the lineup. But right now, I think Naeem Offord can find his way into the 2 deep. I really believe that. I'm excited about this corner room and the star room. It's a little bit of an unknown. You know, with some of these guys being so new, you maybe don't know what you're getting yourself into, but that kind of adds to the excitement. Doesn't it a little bit, that when you get to the end of the season, that when these guys get 9, 10, 11 games under their belt, considering the talent level is higher than maybe some of the transfers that they've brought in, it excites you that this group will be playing better towards the end of the season. All right, let's move from defense to the offensive side of the football. Now, we were talking about everybody being gone in the secondary, that corner and star room. And there's a lot of returning pieces, certainly, within this running back room. Let's talk about the losses. Jordan James. That's the significant loss in this running back room for the Oregon Ducks. Last season, of course, he was the guy in the backfield, over 1,200 yards, 15 touchdowns, second team all Big Ten. He was a 5th-round draft pick of the San Francisco 49ers. There was other like walk-on type of guys, certainly lesser-known guys like Brinson Cobbins graduated, Ellis Bynum transferred to Prairie View A&M, but obviously Jordan James is the loss. And what did they do? They went out and got a guy that's at the very least equally as good in Mekhi Hughes. Over 2,700 yards, 22 touchdowns the past 2 seasons at Tulane. And, they just got the number 1 running back in the transfer portal. You lose a guy that's been very effective the past couple of years. You bring in a guy that's maybe expected to be a bell cow yet again. This running back room is loaded with talent. There's a lot of guys fighting for carries, and that's going to be a big storyline, I think, to play out during fall camp as well. I tend to believe that Mekhi Hughes is certainly going to reprise that Jordan James role this season. But I look to Noah Whittington, I look to Dink Riggs, and I think it is going to be a big fall camp for them because I think it's an overarching storyline within this running back room that everybody's fighting for carries. Rashad Sample said it during the spring. We need to call the NCAA and see if we can play with more than one football. Because how am I going to get these guys the ball? Like, that really speaks to the confidence that the position coach, Rashad Samples, has within this group. Can Noah Whittington push Mekhi Hughes? Can this be a 1A and a 1B situation? I said in my bold predictions, it says, no 1,000-yard rusher, similar to what Ohio State was last year. Can Mekhi Hughes be Travion Henderson? Can Noah Whittington be Quinshon Judkins? Can they get to that room where it's like, hey, one guy rushes for 950, another guy rushes for like 825 or something like that? Or is Mekhi Hughes still getting the yardage or possibly more that he had at Tulane? A healthy Noah Whittington is a really good Noah Whittington. I've said it many times before. I think he's one of the best 1B type of backs in the country. I'm glad that Oregon went out and got Mekhi Hughes. I'm not saying that Noah Whittington could not have replaced, what Jordan James was, but maybe he could have. But I certainly feel a lot more comfortable and I feel a lot better with Hughes within this room. The guy I think that's garnering a lot of buzz throughout the spring and even before spring as well was Dink Riggs. There was a few games where he got in last season, specifically during Washington. Man, when he got the ball, he ran with a lot of pop. He ran with a lot of explosiveness. And there's a lot of people within the building in Eugene that are really excited with what he can provide. He's a redshirt freshman. And we know he's a redshirt freshman, and he's going up against a guy that is a father, that has a son. There's a big, maybe lifestyle difference, certainly within those two. But can Riggs push Noah Whittington in a 2A and 2B type of situation where you would have Mekhi Hughes as the bell cow, and then maybe you split carries there? I think fall camp is going to go a long way, I think, to determine where each one of these guys really sits and what the run game really is going to look like in terms of how the carries are divvied up. But I really feel strongly that these are the 3 guys at the top. It's going to be Hughes, it's going to be Whittington, it's going to be Riggs. Okay, but how exactly are those 3 all going to play in with who's going to get a majority of the carries? I'm really excited because I think all 3 of those guys are really, really talented, especially the experienced guys at the top with Hughes and with Whittington. Whittington showed up. He showed some big-time burst in the spring game. I think that he could have maybe his best season as a Duck running back. He had 779 yards a few years. I think that was 2022 maybe. I think it was his first season at Oregon after transferring over from Western Kentucky. So can he have that type of year? Fall camp, if he can impress and really show what he can do during fall camp, maybe he could get into some of those carries that Hughes is getting. Either way, I'm very confident no matter what happens during fall camp that these guys are going to be able to tout the rock, and this could be one of the best rushing seasons for Oregon in recent memory. I talk about fighting for roles, fighting for carries. You look at the next 2 guys, Jaden Lamar and Jay Harris, I think they're going to be fighting for roles. I don't think either one of those guys is really going to break that top three in terms of a guy that can consistently get carries at the level that those guys are going to. But I think both these guys could really carve out roles in specific situations. Rashad Sample said it during the spring. Jalen Lamar has excellent long speed. You get him out into space, and not a lot of guys can catch him. There's a couple examples of that. Last year, they swing it out on a pass. Dylan Gabriel finds Lamar during the Oregon State game, and he outruns all the Beavers down the sidelines. Look at the spring game this year, right? He scored that first touchdown. He found the hole, found the gap, and he outruns everybody on his way to the end zone. So how do they get him involved in space? We'll see what he can do within fall camp to prove that he can really provide that spark and provide that role going forward. Jay Harris, I think, is more of a short yardage, certainly type of guy, and we'll see because, man, Mekhi Hughes, he's a bulky dude. He's a bulky dude that can get those tough yards. We know what Mekhi Hughes, remember that game against Illinois where he just ran somebody over? We know there are physical runners within this Oregon team. So where exactly does Jay Harris carve out that role, and what does fall camp do to kind of set where he's going to be? I think in 2025 is important for him. And then I look at these true freshmen. That's what do we got already? We got what, 5 guys? Yeah, 5 guys. There's 7 guys total in this room. I would be very surprised. Barring injury, I would be surprised if both these guys don't redshirt. I think both these guys are going to play in 4 or less games this season. You got the Thunder, the modern-day kid that is Davison. You got the Lightning that is De'Aaron Hill. I think these guys have a bright future in the running back room for Oregon. But, man, there's just, like I said at the beginning, this room is just loaded with talent. I am so excited, maybe more than a lot of things, of what this run game can do this season. All right, folks, thanks for celebrating the big 5-0 with me. 50 days until the Ducks kick off against Montana State within Autzen Stadium. So until next time, this has been That Show Out West.